Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We're going to try to keep the air conditioner really jacked up high, so we appreciate everybody coming out on a very hot and muggy Thursday morning. Today we're going to be talking about a paper that we did, I guess we released about 2 weeks ago, called the Broadband Credibility Gap. It's available on our website, www.phoenix-center.org. And as we all know, we've got this, the FCC is proposing to reclassify broadband transport as a Title II common carrier telecommunication service coupled with an aggressive forbearance regime. So whether or not this works or not is the question of the day. And we wrote the paper, and George will get into it in a moment. And the real question is that, on one hand, you've got certainly a cleaner legal case under Title II, but with that comes certain policy risks, because you're going to open the door to the potential for more regulation. And that's sort of the balance that the policy board's got to go through. So we're going to start today with George presenting our research. We're then going to move to a panel discussion comprised of a lot of really experts. And then we're going to move to Commissioner McDowell with some concluding remarks. So without further ado, let me get started with George.
Okay, the paper, policy paper 40, is the broadband credibility gap. Credibility is a term we use from game theory. It doesn't mean you're a liar, which some people may interpret it as meaning. It just means you're not credible, which means the promise that you make cannot be believed in a strategic sense, that the behavior of participants in the game act as if your promise is not legitimate. Before I begin, I would like to thank the chairman and his general counsel for providing all the ammunition I'll need to tell the story to tell today. Investment in jobs. I will be talking about investment today. If you're not talking about investment in jobs, you might as well not be talking in Washington these days. So there's a benefit somewhat to keeping my focus on those grounds. And fortunately, in this case, the issue of investment was a primary component of the proposal for light touch or third-way regulation. But as an economist, I must add a qualifier here. This is a production function, okay? In a very general form. Q is output, services, goods or services. K is capital, and L is labor. Okay? Everybody understand that? That is a bad thing. Quantity constant, if capital, investment, and labor rises and output doesn't change, that's a bad thing. Okay? Now, if capital and labor fall, output constant, that's a good thing. Okay, is everybody with me? So the idea of we need more jobs and more capital is a bit strange to an economist, unless there is an increase in output that goes along with it. So, noting that, I'll go back to the political discussion of investment. Why is investment important? Well, the basic goals have been constant for FCC policy, according to the chairman, to encourage private investment. And I didn't say it, the chairman said it. This is an important thing. The National Broadband Plan is about actions government should take to encourage more private investment and innovation. So increased investment, increased innovation are important things. I don't think anybody would contest that in the discussion that's occurring today. So what's the problem that we're talking about? The problem is the Comcast case. And the problem is the D.C. Circuit pretty much told the FCC they were outside their scope of jurisdiction. There are many explanations for that. I'm sure we'll hear a few interpretations from the lawyers later today. I have my own. But in any case, we have the decision, and now the FCC has proposed a response to that decision. we have ourselves, as the chairman describes, a Morton's fork. We can stick with Title I jurisdiction, the current way we deal with broadband, which is an ancillary jurisdiction approach. The problem with that approach is, as the chairman and the general counsel describe, is a serious risk of failure. It's the legal problem with respect to Title I. Or we can reclassify broadband service as a Title II service, overruling the decision earlier a few years ago to change at least DSL to an information service. Now, the arguments in favor of Title II is it clarifies the legal foundation. It's a legal certainty argument. But there is a problem with Title II reclassification. There are two problems. It fails to reflect the long-standing bipartisan consensus that the Internet should remain unregulated. Okay, Title II regulation is pretty heavy-handed regulation. Can be, at least. And second, it subjects broadband to extensive regulations ill-suited to broadband that will chill investment and innovation and reduce investors' confidence. Now, these quotes are not my quotes. These quotes are from the chairman of the FCC, from his statement. Right. So, by the chairman's standards, we have a causal chain. Title II reclassification applies extensive and heavy-handed prescriptive regulation to broadband, ill-suited to broadband. That's the cause. The effect is a chill in investment and innovation. So we have a situation where more investment is a good thing, it's desirable. We have a proposal to reclassify broadband service to Title II, which in its unadulterated state will reduce investment. It's a negative thing. Thus we have the Morton's fork, where if I stick with Title I, I'm on shaky legal foundation. If I move to Title II, I've got a problem with investment from excessive regulation. So I have a proposal. It's sort of like making games illegal, I guess, to solve that problem. We're just going to say, oh, we promise not to do those heavy-handed things that will reduce investment. And this way, we can get the legal certainty of a Title II regime without all the ugliness of reduced investment, because we will only do the light regulation things. Now, the problem with this is the argument has no credibility in an economic sense, okay, in a game theory sense. And what I'm saying is this. I'm not going to go too much through this because your eyes will glaze over, I'm sure. But if you think about it as a two-stage game, which is what we're dealing with, and that is a firm A chooses to invest. The details of this are provided in the paper, by the way, if you want to read that. We have a firm A that chooses not to invest and has some payoff. Its own payoff of 3, and the regulator gets a payoff of 3. Okay, this is I put my money in something else, or stocks or bonds or whatever. Or B, I choose to invest. Once I invest, then the regulator makes his play. Okay, he chooses his strategy. The regulator can engage in heavy-handed regulation. In this case, we've designed the payoffs where the firm makes 0 profit. Okay, and the regulator has a high payoff. He makes consumers happy or interest groups happy, which is what regulators typically do. And then, or he chooses light touch regulation, in which the payoffs are 4 and 5. The payoffs of light touch regulation are higher than the no investment payoffs. Okay, so both the firm certainly wants to invest and have light touch regulation as a preference versus no investment at all. I mean, telecom companies are in the business of providing telecommunication services and information services. So we want to choose that. So the issue is, what is the payoff? Well, here you see that the payoff in this example here, that the payoff to the regulator is higher with heavy-handed regulation. The firm seeing this, recognizing this, that the payoff of the regulator is going to change over time, that once these investments are made, they're sunk, the regulator can extract the rents from the firm or alter the regulatory regime to make himself better without any loss because the investments are sunk once in place. The firm says, okay, I'm not going to make the investment. The firm views this as the most likely outcome. Okay? And this is in a empirical question, and we'll get to the empirical evidence next. The issue of credibility is, can the FCC be trusted to impose and maintain light touch regulation under a reclassification Title II regime? The question then becomes, what does the evidence show? And there are two issues here. One is the question of pre-commitment, which is another term from theory. And that means I can promise you something and you have great confidence that that promise is legitimate or that I will follow through on that. I'm making a commitment and I can pre-commit that down the road I promise not to renege on our deal. Right? If I can't promise to renege on the deal, of course there's uncertainty with respect to that, and that affects firms' decisions. The other is the present behavior. So the question is, with respect to credibility, the two questions are, A, can you make a pre-commitment to a light touch regulatory regime? And B, does your present behavior suggest you will be a light touch regulator? Does anybody in this room believe the latter, that the Janikowski administration will go down as one of light touch regulation? I don't really think hardly anybody would really believe that. We'll get to some evidence of that in a minute. What's interesting when you read, if you take this, if you read the paper, just that section of the paper, which is the second section, read that and then go back and read the statements. And what you'll find embedded in those statements is exactly this issue of credibility. You'll see all these discussions, we need to put in place upfront forbearance and meaningful boundaries to guard against regulatory overreach. Okay? It's credibility. We're trying to sell credibility to people. The Commission will take steps to give providers and investors confidence and certainty that a renunciation of regulatory overreach will not unravel. Okay? We're trying to convince the community, the investment community, and the firms that I promise not to change my mind in the future, or change my behavior in the future. And there are many, many statements. All this discussion of the difficulty of overturning a forbearance decision is an attempt to convince people that there's pre-commitment. Okay, so these things are very rich in the game theory. In fact, I think they make a great example for teaching game theory and the issue of credibility and pre-commitment. Because the statements just reek of that notion as you read them. And of course they argue they can preempt state regulation. All these things are an effort to say, okay, we're going to do this and it's just very hard for us to renege on the promise that we're going to make to you of light touch regulation. But, alas, the General Counsel of the Commission says, you know guys, we can't make that pre-commitment. We wouldn't, we couldn't, and we shouldn't make that pre-commitment. So in the same statement it says, we promise to be good going forward. At the end, we can't make that promise. I can't make that promise to you. So the issue of pre-commitment is a zero. The FCC cannot pre-commit to light touch regulation. As an example, former chairman of the FCC, Michael Cox, Commissioner Cox, has said, I would have preferred plain simple Title II reclassification. Okay. He was a former chairman. This could be chairman again under certain circumstances. Or somebody like that could be chairman again under certain circumstances. And so then we go from this, we will have Title II reclassification, but we promise to be good until the next guy comes around who doesn't believe that this was a good idea to start with. Okay, very tenuous argument with respect to pre-commitment. And in fact, the whole notion of pre-commitment was entirely rejected by the General Counsel. What about present behavior? Okay. We promise no price regulation. If you read the statements, we promise no price regulation. There's a few problems with that promise. The first problem with that promise is in the Open Internet NPRM, which is one of the more significant actions of the present Commission. They propose to price regulate the Internet and broadband service. An explicit proposal to price regulate. So their promise not to price regulate has already been overturned by this Commission. Okay. and that was the non-discrimination principle. We wrote a paper on the describing how that's price regulation. It says, thou shalt not charge. I mean, that's price regulation under any definition, and that's what they propose to do. So they've already proposed to price regulate. So they've already reneged on that promise. And there are many other cases. In the National Broadband Plan, okay, we're going to give away spectrum to somebody who'll sell broadband for free. That's a proposal. Okay? And while it's not explicit price regulation, it's backhanded price regulation. It's a statement that I think prices are too high. Okay? If you read the broadband plan, you'll see that everywhere. If you read most of the speeches today, you'll see that everywhere. That there's a belief that prices are not affordable. And if there's a belief that prices are not affordable, then the regulator is going to want to do something about that. Say, oh, well, we'll promote competition. Well, good luck with that, okay? The economic conditions are not really conducive to a whole lot of competition in this business. We've been promising that for ages. If it weren't for the void product, we'd look a heck of a lot like we did years ago. Right? Increasing competition is very difficult to do. We're going to monitor prices. We're going to collect data on prices to see if there's some policy. What policy response is there? If there's a lack of competition and the prices are high, what policy response do you propose other than price regulation? I don't know what the other response would be. Special access, we have numerous special access proceedings. You know what those proceedings are explicitly focused on? And special access, by the way, is broadband transport. In fact, one of the open proceedings is a broadband transport proceeding where they're proposing to price regulate that service. Sky Terror, I'm going to get to that in a minute. No unbundling yet. Okay, the statement said we promised it's not going to lead to more unbundling, where Title II classification would open that door certainly. The FCC states in the National Broadband Plan the FCC should comprehensively review that should be wholesale competition regulation. So we promise not to unbundle, but we should completely review these. I guess just to sort of see what's going on, not really do anything about it. Yeah, that's not very credible. And then they have an inquiry at present in special access, competitive access into local fiber facilities. These are unbundling regimes that have been promised not to occur. And then, of course, the FCC sponsored Burden Study, which I would be remiss not to mention. I encourage you to read my response to that, which is a good fun, good read. And you'll not believe we're in the Burden Study when you've done that. No reversal on forbearance. This is a very interesting argument since they pretty much just did that in the Quest Phoenix forbearance decision. A legal decision has two aspects to it. It solves a problem, a current problem, and it establishes precedent. The Omaha decision and the Phoenix decision are nothing alike in their analysis. The precedential aspect of the Omaha decision has been completely gutted. And now we have an exceedingly high bar, competition bar, to achieve forbearance. In fact, the bar is so high that I'm puzzled by the argument that we can forbear from many of the aspects of Title II in this light touch regulatory regime if we apply the Phoenix logic, competition logic, to the forbearance decisions that presumably will go along with reclassification. I find it very difficult to, the FCC could make a plausible case without rejecting the arguments in the Phoenix case, which was a textbook antitrust style analysis in an industry that is not well suited to that analysis. In Title II, they talk about reversal. Title II is a reversal of a decision that this commission has made. So this commission's willingness to overrule past decisions is not in question. It's a guarantee. They will do it. They have no problem with that. So I think the argument is weak. It's going to be interesting, I think, to see whether or not someone comes in and challenges the Omaha decision or asks for a review of the Omaha forbearance decision in light of the Phoenix decision. I'm not sure whose interest that would be in. Certainly not in the commission's. And that's not obvious to me that's in any CLEC's interest, but we'll find out, perhaps. The other argument they make is that wireless is an archetype of this light touch regulation, which is extremely odd, given that the wireless industry at present is the focus of much regulatory interest. And much of it deals with pricing. Of course, the FCC has some difficulty regulating prices directly because of the statute. But man, they're going to try to regulate it every other way, it appears. An ETF is a pricing regime. Equipment is part of the pricing vector of the firm. All these things are being approached by the FCC. The wireless industry is being carefully scrutinized. The recent CNRS competition report seems to set the stage for a finding that the wireless industry isn't competitive enough, and thus it requires increased regulatory attention. And then there's the SkyTerra decision, which for a government arguing for transparency is not good, given that much of the relevant documentation was only released after the decision by the Commission. And it was, for all practical purposes, a sneakily imposed spectrum cap on the wireless industry. So saying that wireless is the archetype of light touch regulation is a bit strange. The other issue, of course, is that wireless has a statute in it which limits the FCC's ability to do some things like price regulations. So there are external constraints on the Commission's actions that would not exist in a reclassified broadband world. So, in effect, what we have is the Title II classification shields investment by the chairman's own causal connection unless the FCC can pre-commit to a light touch regulation. Okay. But the FCC explicitly rejects its ability to pre-commit, and its own behavior suggests it does not have a light touch regulation agenda in mind. Okay. So, as a consequence, the chilling effect of reclassification remains intact. Okay, because the probability is very high of defection from the promise of light touch regulation. Now, is there any evidence of this? Sure, there's evidence of this. Investors don't believe it, okay, nor should they. Okay, not that they understand game theory, but they understand the basics. Game theory is an explanation or description of human behavior. Cable stocks, on the announcement of this, just plummeted down 10% over the 3 days around the announcement date. Okay, now you say, well, so what? It's the stock market. Well, this matters. Okay, because as the stock price goes down, a firm's market cap goes down. Market cap is a component of the market value of the firm. The investment of the firm is driven by the ratio of its market value over its replacement cost. Okay, if something costs me $100 and I can sell it for $1,000, I'll do that a lot, as long as I can do it. If something costs $100 and I can sell it for $100, I mean, that's not a good deal, I'll stop. Okay? It's called the Q theory of investment. It's the modern theory, economic theory of investment. And it suggests that as market cap goes down, market value goes down. As market value goes down, investment goes down. Capital expenditures go down. And there's significant empirical evidence that this relationship is legitimate and intact. Also, you see a number of the analysts, you know, this is a proposal, it's not an action, it's very difficult to get direct empirical evidence today of what it's going to do since it hasn't been done. But you see the analysts suggest that the negative investment effects are highly likely. Reclassification could act as a Trojan horse for greater regulation. Cable operators and Verizon could be forced to share their network with competitors. They don't believe the unbundling story. No unbundling story. The potential for lower investment is likely. Many of these statements were made. And of course, you can find some investment analysts that will say, no, we don't think it'll be that way. Okay. But there's some that do, and the people that buy and sell stocks have clearly stated their belief in the system that this will lead to an increase in regulation, the reduction in return on investment, and as a consequence, a reduction in investment. So let's think about the Comcast decision. And we discussed this a little bit in the paper. I won't spend a lot of time with it. I'm not an attorney. I do have my views as to what it says. And Chris Wright, when I talked to him about it, suggested I call the judge and share my views with him. I think he was kidding. Interpreting the Comcast decision is important. In my experience at the FCC and dealing with the FCC, they always overreact to court decisions that pretty much give them a body slam. They did this with the usage decision, or was it the Iowa decision, the first unbundling decision. They overreacted. And rather than listening to the court say, explain yourself better, they said, you better go change something, right? We got rejected, so we got to change the whole regime rather than just explain ourselves. And that was laid the seeds for future decisions in the end of unbundling, which was really a consequence of the Kennard administration as much as the Powell administration. But one issue that I think is interesting is, was the Comcast decision, we say we did this Title II thing light, we don't have heavy-handed regulation. Was the Comcast order heavy-handed regulation? I mean, I think that's an important question. There's one argument, that the order was badly written, the Comcast order was badly written, and I think it was poorly written. It wasn't, if you read the decisions on ancillary jurisdiction, you'll see the FCC didn't make those connections, that broadband is connected to telephone service in this way, and therefore I'm going to regulate broadband, which is the argument that it has to make. It just, I'm going to regulate broadband because I feel like it, and I'm going to do this thing. Well, even if they had made the ancillary argument correctly, would telling a network operator how it manages its network and designs its protocol, is that a legitimate FCC? Is that within the FCC's authority? And I think some people would say no, some people might say yes, and some people will say no. But that is an interesting question. Are we saying we need to regulate the commission more because the court said heavy-handed regulation wasn't acceptable, but we promised not to do heavy-handed regulations? It's kind of a strange argument to me, one needs to be thought through. The FCC continues to use its Title I authority, will continue to use its Title I authority, has many proposals on the table with very good arguments, some of them in this paper, talking about how it goes about using its Title I authority. So the notion that Title I authority has been eviscerated entirely by this decision is just untrue. So it makes you wonder whether or not we're just using this as an excuse to fabricate a legal crisis, in the same way we use OECD broadband rankings to fabricate a broadband crisis to promote an aggressive regulatory agenda. I think, and we make the argument in the paper, that much of what the Commission wants to do, transparency, things like that, could easily be done under a Title I regime. Legal certainty is one issue that relates. Now, investment, this is a classic case of the policy world not understanding economics. They go, oh, well, certainty is good for investment. Certainty is good for uncertainty is bad for investment. Certainty is good for investment. And well, that's financial certainty and financial uncertainty that affects investment. Legal certainty has no relationship per se to investment. And so they're arguing about legal certainty and somehow translating that into financial certainty. For example, and our model shows this in the paper, the theoretical model towards the end of the paper. Legal certainty has two aspects. I can be 100% legal certain that I will be left alone. Right? That's 100% legal certainty. I'm completely certain that I will be left alone as a firm. Or I can be 100% certain that the regulator is going to stick it to me. Right? So you got 100% certainty of profits, high profits or whatever, or 100% certainty of being exploited. Okay, so there is no relationship between legal certainty and investment, because I can be certain about the legal environment at many levels, these two extremes being one. Okay? So this nexus between the two is false, and is typical that the economics of the issue are spoiled by people who don't understand the economics of the issues. Now, this is not in the paper. As typically, 3 weeks after I write a paper, I'm on to something else. I think this is really what we're talking about. The interesting thing about Title I and Title II is that all of Title II is available under Title I. All of it. Up to what's in it. Okay, we had the case where the FCC tried to impose common carrier obligations on the cable companies under Title III connections, and the judges looked at it and said, wait a minute, it says right here under Title III you can't make broadcasters common carriers, and you are using an ancillary argument to Title III, therefore you can't do this. But didn't say you couldn't do anything else. It said you just can't do what's in here, but what's in here you can do. Right? Under Title I authority, you can do anything under Title II. You just got to make a good argument for doing it, rather than just saying, I get to do it because I'm a regulator and this is a telecommunications service, therefore, what's the problem? With ancillary jurisdiction, you have to say, okay, I have to get over this hurdle of making a good legal argument as to why I have authority over this and why it's necessary within the context of the statute. So what I think, really what we're dealing with here is the probability of success, and this goes to the legal certainty argument. If we envision a world here of the legal certainty, and just say this is the probability of success in court, 0 to 100% for some decision. You have light touch regulation and heavy-handed regulation. It's probably the case that Title II gives you greater legal certainty for whatever you want to do. Okay, across the board, you have greater legal certainty, greater probability of success in court. But I think as you get more heavy-handed, that probability probably still declines a little bit. The court may say, wait, what are you trying to do here? Okay, telling a firm that it has to present its bill in a certain way or tell people what they're doing with their network, the courts are not going to be so, they're not going to stare at that word as long as they're going to stare at one that says, I'm going to price regulate this business or something like that, right? Just gloss over it and maybe say, okay, what's the big deal? But I think what happens under Title I is you get you could get by with stuff, transparency and things like that, but probably with nearly the same legal certainty under Title I. Okay? But if you really want to do the heavy-handed stuff, the probability of success falls off pretty quick. Okay? I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's in these people's head from what they say, and this is the only thing I can come up with because Title II is available, all of it. Under Title I jurisdiction, I can do 201, 202, 208, all of that stuff. Okay, I just got to make an argument, an ancillary argument to do it. So I think, but this presents an interesting problem in two respects. One is, as long as the legal certainty is higher, the investment effect remains. Okay? So I'm working on a formal proof to reject the argument of the chairman that this is feasible. I think, without question, it is not possible. It'll be a QED at the end. It's not mathematically legitimate argument. Second, I think this argument, these probabilities are close, I think, in the end. I will ask the panel whether they believe me or not. Chris has defended the FCC in many cases, so maybe you'll have an idea. But, so the argument is, why do I want this legal certainty? I want this legal certainty not here for the light touch stuff, because I can probably get away with that anyway. Where I need it is down here in the heavy-handed stuff. Okay, that's where I need it. I need reclassification to do price regulation, do unbundling regulation, which the court is going to balk at if I walk in there under an ancillary argument and say that's what I would want. If I walked under an ancillary argument and says, I think they should tell people what they're doing, of course, they well, probably. Okay, whatever. No big deal. So I think, and these ideas are information, but I think that's the way, really one of the only ways to think about it, because of the availability of Title II, of non-discrimination, Section 202, under Title I jurisdiction as well. That summarizes the discussion. Of course, there's much more. It's a 50-page paper here. But I encourage you to take some time to read it, at least skim it, particularly the game theory in Section 2, which explains this. And then the litany of present actions that suggest that this commission, if you have any doubt in your mind, and I doubt very many of you have any doubt in your mind, that this present commission is one that can be trusted to use the light touch when it comes to regulation. So before we begin with our panel, are there any questions on this analysis? Well, good, because we've got a great panel of some very smart, experienced people, which is odd for a panel sometimes. Experienced, smart people. but we were careful in our choices. These guys are steeped in this very issue. Okay, so they know what's going on. And, we didn't pick and choose by their positions. We just picked and choose by their skill sets. So with that, here's Larry to introduce our set of distinguished panelists.